Hi everybody, welcome to day 4 of week 4 of our unit Engaging with Our Community. Before we go into the lesson, let's do a quick overview of what exactly we're going to do today. So first, you're going to have an opening and do now activity, then a before reading activity. You're going to watch a video clip and answer some questions about what you saw in the video. Then you'll have your into the text moment with a new text, and an after the reading activity, and finally a closing and connecting. Teachers, for the closing and connecting, you can choose any of the activities that are going to work best for you and for your students. And teachers, don't forget, as usual, in your section below, you're going to have your notes for teachers with additional tips and suggestions for how to implement today's lesson. So let's go ahead and get started. So again, we are on day 4 of week 4 of our unit, Engaging with Our Community. Students, every activity that we're doing this week is leading up to writing a persuasive letter to local political figures, politicians, about an issue that we have in our own communities. And today we're going to be working again with our community health profiles. Our essential question is, how do communities evidence and overcome inequities? So again, how do communities evidence and overcome inequities? We'll talk more about this word inequity later in the lesson. At this point, can somebody please read out loud our lesson objectives below here in this pink box? Teachers, you can pause this video and give students some time to read those lesson objectives out loud. Thank you for reading our lesson objectives. We have 2 for today. The first is to make logical inferences from the close reading of a text, which is after we read to think about what was that text teaching us, what we learned from it. Our second lesson objective is to use context clues, collaboration, and/or resources to analyze words and phrases. So whenever we have new words and phrases in English, we're going to use some of the clues around them or work together to figure out what they mean. Teachers, at this point, you can pause this video and facilitate the opening do now activity, which is a See, Think, Wonder exercise, as well as the before reading activity. And please don't forget, below on this page, you'll have the purpose here in the orange box. Review that with students, please, as well as the academic vocabulary here in gray, especially since the word inequity is going to be featured later in the lesson. After that, you can go into the text. You'll find the link to the text here, and then don't forget you're going to have your guiding questions and your discussion questions here in this gray box. When you pick this video back up, we will begin the after the reading activity. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your opening and do now, your before reading, and your into the text moments from the lesson. So now we're going to start to do the after the reading the activity together. And this after the reading activity has 2 parts. So the first is we're going to look at data from the Lower East Side in Chinatown. We're going to compare it for our neighborhood. And then we're going to think about what are the similarities and differences. And we're also going to think about if we think of the differences as inequities. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to break this down into multiple steps. So our first step is to review the data. So again, we're looking at the Lower East Side in Chinatown, as well as our own neighborhoods. As you guys might remember, my school neighborhood is East Harlem. So that's the data I'm going to look at today to compare. So we first need to open up our community health profiles. This link here will take you directly to the community health profile for the Lower East Side in Chinatown. Let me go back and make sure I have it open as well for East Harlem. I'm going to find that link here in this slide. That's going to take me to the whole list. Okay. And then again, we're back at this page, and we are looking specifically at maternal and child health data. Maternal meaning people who give birth, mothers, and then as well as the children living in that community. We're going to look at the issues of their health. So let's open up our health profiles. I'll first open the one for the Lower East Side in Chinatown. Looking at the table of contents, again, our focus today, I'm going to zoom in, make that a little bigger, is maternal and child health. That's going to be on page 11 and 12. So we'll scroll down and make sure we are on those pages. So this page and the next will be where we'll find our information for maternal and child health. And then on my community health profile for my neighborhood, I'm going to open that up. Again, we're using East Harlem in Manhattan and going again to pages 11 and 12 for that maternal and child health section. Scroll in a little bit to make it a little easier to read. Okay, so going back to where we're gathering our data, we have multiple categories from the different statistics on our community health profile page. So the first one that I have listed is late or no prenatal care. The second one is preterm births. So we're going to go look for this information in our community health profile. And teachers and students, note that you can choose which categories to include if you're going to use an organizer like this, whichever ones are interesting to you. So for the Lower East Side in Chinatown, late or no prenatal care, and it's going to have a small explanation in this light blue box of what exactly that means, but to summarize, it means when someone is pregnant that they get care from a doctor to make sure that their pregnancy is healthy, and that's called prenatal care. So late or prenatal care, which means if someone who's pregnant did not get enough health care while they were pregnant, we're going to look here. So the Lower East Side in Chinatown, that statistic is 5% for late or no prenatal care. So I'm going to go back to here where I'm gathering my data. I'm going to say 5%. And that's very small, so we're going to make that a little bigger. Okay, now let's find the same statistic for East Harlem. So late or no prenatal care, here's the section here. East Harlem, I see 8.4%. Okay, so that means for 8.4% of the births for people living in East Harlem, they did not receive enough health care while they were pregnant. So that's our first category, late or no prenatal care. We'll do the second category, which will be preterm births. Okay, so this is my community health profile for, actually, let me go to the one for Chinatown and Lower East Side first. Preterm births is here, and here's some more information in the blue box. Again, it says preterm birth is a key driver of infant death. So there's a connection between how many births are preterm births and how likely the baby is to die. So for the Lower East Side in Chinatown, that number is 8.2%. 8.2%. Going to write that in. Make sure it's big enough. 8.2%. Let's find the same statistic for East Harlem. So here again for preterm births. So here for preterm births, we see East Harlem is 10.8%. 10.8%. So going to add that statistic here to our table. 10.8%. And then a note here that when we're making comparisons, we're going to understand that if it's a higher percentage, it means that it's a less healthy outcome. So it's a more negative outcome than a lower percentage. So now we're going to go to the second part of our after the reading activity, which is to write what we think about this information. So let's look a little closer at this slide. The questions are, what are the similarities and differences in maternal and child health care? Would you name these differences as inequities? And then below here, we're going to answer that question here. And we have on the side some vocabulary to help us write. To answer the question about similarities and differences, we could use some of this vocabulary: healthier, less healthy, similar, different. When we're talking about inequities, if you remember from earlier in the lesson when we reviewed our key vocabulary, inequity means something is unfair or unjust. So we might want to use that exact vocabulary, unjust, unfair, when we're discussing inequities, as well as maybe the word problem. So using our vocabulary and our prompts, let's respond to these questions. So compared to, and this blank is for your own neighborhood, so I'm going to use East Harlem. The Lower East Side in Chinatown, we'll say, is healthier in its maternal and child health care. And we can go back to our statistics to get exact numbers for late or no prenatal care, as well as preterm births. The Lower East Side in Chinatown is different than East Harlem because those statistics are lower. So that's the first question here. What are the similarities and differences? And we use some of the vocabulary healthier. We also use different. So thinking back to our second question, would you name these differences as inequities? So these differences are inequities because they are unjust and unfair, and they suggest that there is a bigger problem in healthcare. Okay, do a little. So here we use some of our vocabulary: inequity, as well as unjust and unfair. Okay, so this is one way that we can complete our after the reading activity. Again, our steps were to gather information and statistics and then write what we thought of that information. So teachers, at this point, you can finish this video and go facilitate the after the reading activity with your students, and then do the closing and connecting. Again, this is the one where it's your choice. And we'll see you again for day 5.